Hi, everyone. A quick announcement before we get into today's recording, and that is our office, Fame Architecture and Design, is hiring. The two positions we're looking to fill are an intermediate architect and an intermediate interior architect or interior designer. To qualify, you must be located in Los Angeles and have 5 to 8 years of experience in custom modern residences, which is what we do. The software that we use in our office is SketchUp, Enscape, ArchiCAD, and the Adobe Creative Suite. If you don't know ArchiCAD, it's not a big deal. Please still apply, and you will learn it in our office. We mainly want to hire talented designers who are hardworking. We are a full architecture and interiors practice, which means that you will be exposed to or do site planning, architecture, interior design, structural coordination, MVP coordination, permitting, renderings, client presentations, construction documents, and construction administration. So if you're interested in working with us, please submit your materials to hiring@famearchitects.com, and that's our website and where you can find out more about us. This is the second studio hosted by the Architecture and Design Office Fame. My name is David Lead. With me is Marina Borderonay. The two of us are architects, partners at the office, and of course, hosts of the show. Today, it's the two of us in the studio. And as you know, a few weeks ago, we talked about our shift house on the podcast, and that was announced also at around that time. And so today, what we're going to do is talk about some of the conversations that we've had with prospective buyers and clients. And more broadly speaking, the different reference points that prospective clients have when they're talking with us as an architect or an architect in general. Reference points for what exactly do you provide as an architect? What is your fee? Why is it so high? Why is it so low? Why are your services different from that? And trying to demystify and clarify that what an architect is providing and should be providing, and therefore what it costs to use an architect, versus the opposite, which is going with like plans.com and paying a fraction of the price for whatever they're offering. And so we're trying to clarify like the differences between these two things, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, we're basically talking about like what do you get with plans.com versus what do you get if you hire an architect?
Yeah, okay, that's a better way of putting it. Yeah. And is it
want
worth
to know
it?
what this episode is about.
And is it worth it to go with an architect? Maybe not. Well, got to listen to the episode and find out. Sponsors.
This episode of The Second Studio is brought to you by BQE Core, the all-in-one firm management software built for architects. Designed by architects for architects, Core helps you track time effortlessly, manage projects seamlessly, and get paid faster so you can focus on design, not spreadsheets. With powerful automation and real-time insights, it's everything you need to run a smarter, more profitable firm. See how BQE Core can transform your practice by clicking the link in our show notes.
The Second Studio podcast is sponsored by Autodesk. Do you know about Autodesk Forma? Available standalone or as part of their AEC Collection software bundle, it's a specialized AI-assisted 3D design tool that can transform early project planning. With Forma, you can rapidly model multiple massing options at the start of your projects and analyze the embodied carbon costs of different volumes, layouts, and material choices. You can then deepen your understanding of your sites by incorporating real-world contextual data for daylight, wind, noise, and more. Start your projects right with Autodesk Forma. Check out the link in our show notes to learn more. This is the Second Studio with myself and Marina. Here we go. So as you might know, we announced recently our shift house, which are office designed. And again, the shift house is a pre-designed model house to help the Pacific Palisades rebuild. And it's different from what we typically do because most often we are hired by end users to create a custom house, ground up or remodel. And as a pre-designed house, that means that the plans and our services to complete it are available for someone to buy online, let's say, or they would contract with us, but the plans are available for people to see and then purchase. And what's interesting about that is, and we have a recorder where we talk about our design thinking of that house, which is separate from this. But what's been interesting about it being released, since a few weeks ago, because we've gotten a bit of a lot of folks reaching out about it and asking about it, is that we have now been exposed to a much wider audience and group of people, prospective buyers and clients, who are not the folks who are interested in hiring an architect to do a custom house. That's typically our lane, right? And those are the people that we attract. Now we're attracting people who are not interested in doing a custom house, and they want to do something that's much more cost-effective, faster, pre-designed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is great. And that's the whole purpose of the house. But in that segment, in that sector of architecture, of pre-designed things you can buy and plans you can buy, we are now bundled in with a large population of other architects and websites selling plans that is not really within our range. So I'm talking about, like quickplans.com or like whatever, efficientplans.com or buymyplans.com, whatever, these kinds of things. And so what's been interesting is that people reach out, and I'm finding that their metrics, their reference point for what would be considered expensive or cheap in terms of the architect's fee, expensive or cheap regarding the construction costs, everyone else's costs too, all the other soft costs, and also the schedule. Is the schedule long or is it fast? Is completely, that reference point is completely different from what we're used to in custom houses. And people that are in the pre-designed plans buying mode have generally a different reference point sometimes, right? They think that all the stuff I mentioned should be way, way, way cheaper and way faster than what we are accustomed to.
Yeah, and to these people's defense, right? For first of all, they didn't elect to do a project, so it's kind of like this thing that they have to this thing that they have to quickly figure out. But also, I think most of them never worked with an architect or never, built a house from scratch, which is probably most people out there, right? Like. Sure. If you look at the population, like it's the vast majority. So then, what do you start from there, right? Because your friends might not even have experience working with architects. So what I would do, I would go on Google and look for like, okay, maybe I could just buy some plans and get started. That
I need
seems
to buy
like
floor plans
the
for
easiest,
a house,
right?
yeah.
So like pre-designed home plans or whatever, and then I end up on those websites
or
and
prefab websites,
and it looks really appealing. But I also find architects, and therefore I just kind of like put them on the same level of comparison.
Yeah.
But the thing is like, I don't know, like plans.com is probably like if you go get your haircut done at Supercut.
Sure.
And an architect you hire for a home is like if you go to like, I don't know, one of the 5 top hair salon in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Like you can't really, it's kind of unfair to compare them because they offer completely different things.
Yeah.
Supercut, there is maybe like the basic, the medium, and the high, more expensive haircut, right? That's your choice. Like you're limited to these 3 on the menu, and it's like 3 fixed price, and that's it, tip included. And the other one, like there is a whole range of possibilities.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit unfair. I've been to this website before, like plans.com or whatever. Or for ADUs too, they're also super popular because ADUs are these like 500 square feet thing. I can plop in my backyard. Why would I need to pay an architect? I could just get the plans and get started.
Yeah.
Well, look, you go on those websites. First of all, the website sucks. Like, I would never go to a hair salon if the storefront sucks, because what are you going to end up looking like, when you come out?
Like you went to Supercut.
If you go kind of bald, you're not taking much risk. But if you go with like a full head of hair, like like, hey, it might not end up really well. I've been to this website. The interface sucks. I feel like the choice is limited because that is the business model.
Point, sure.
Like, what do you want? 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 900 square feet to like 1,500 square feet, and that's kind of it. Worst case scenario, you don't even see elevations; you just see floor plans. Which, to be fair, how many people outside of architects can read floor plans and understand what the space is going to feel like?
I agree that a custom house and hiring an architect to do that versus, plans that are pre-designed are very different things. And, honestly, it's easy to say that the cost of those two could be different by a magnitude of 10 or more, depending on the level of house you're trying to create, for sure. So it's hard to talk about fees on here but I will say, broadly speaking, in the single-family residential sector, any standard architect, so I'm not talking about like a premier architect necessarily, but a standard architect should be around 10% of the construction cost.
In California, at least.
In California, but it's also, I've heard about it in other states as well. That's and then it goes up. So 20% of construction costs is considered you're hiring someone super boutique and they are charging a hefty premium because of whatever reasons. 12%, 14% can also make sense depending on many other factors. So 10 to 20 or 10 to 14 is typically like the range that I would say. If And so, but that also means that the construction, so that also means that, again, you can go buy plans online for a tenth of that. And there's a qualitative difference in the product, yes. And I think everyone understands that. But what people might not realize is, like, to your point, some of these websites, they sell like floor plans and then elevations, and you see one rendering. So in the work that we produce as an office for a project, not even the process design work with the client, let's kick that out. Let's not talk about it. Let's just talk about the final documents, the final renderings that get approved, the final floor plans, the final elevations, final all the documentation stuff and material samples, whatever else. If we compare that to only permit drawing, floor plans, and elevations, permit drawings and permitting floor plans and elevations are probably like a tenth of the total material we produce. So in that example, it does make sense that plans.com is going to be a fraction of what we would charge, and it does make sense that what we would charge, a lot of architects, would be a lot more. It has to do with a qualitative difference, like we said, but also it's a quantitative one.
Of course,
you're not getting all the materials that the architect's producing. Now,
I mean, it's like if I go back to the analogy of the haircut, right? Supercut, you have to have your hair washed at home already. You,
right.
you know, you might even have to like cut your bangs yourself because they might not even do it there. You know, like,
sure.
You might need to do like touch up. Like they won't even dry your hair. You got to go home and finish drying. Like you can't just compare the price. You have to dive into what is in that price.
Unfortunately, for most people, when they're embarking on deciding on what architect they're going to use, they don't do that level of research, which is they should, but they don't. Now, people might be wondering, well, like why does an architect produce 5x, 10x, 3x, whatever, so much more stuff compared to what I can buy online? It would seem unnecessary because people are buying the stuff online in their building, and obviously that business exists. They are selling stuff, and they show pictures of houses being built. Oh God, this is a lot. Maybe I don't want to get into this, but a lot of the documentation work an architect does is the construction documentation. That's like a very hefty portion of our work.
Yeah.
And those sets are very, very intense, and they detail and specify and have drawn like everything in the house. Again, those sets are like 10x what you're buying online. And the reason why the construction document set needs to be as hefty as I'm describing when we or any architect does it is because that's how we get accurate pricing. That's also how the contractor knows exactly more or less what to do. That's also how we know once we are in construction when there's a discrepancy or a problem, which always happens a couple times at least. We all look to the construction documents and say, okay, that detail was drawn. It's here and it wasn't built that way, so let's rectify it or whatever else. All that information
it
is
also
just missing.
impacts schedule because you're planning ahead before you start building. So let's say I am a person on plans.com. I'm buying floor plans, and now I bought my floor plans for $200. Like jackpot. Like I saved like thousands of dollars on hiring an architect. Now what do? I go to a builder I found. I went on Google, look for a builder, found a builder. I'm like, hey builder, that floor plans from plans.com. Can you start building tomorrow? Well, some builders might be like, yeah, sure. And they're just going to kind of like wing it. Mm-hmm. And then most builders would be like, oh, okay, well, you need permits. Those plans are not permitted. So who's going to get those permits? And then, well, what does the elevation looks like? What does the interior of the rooms look like? What materials are you using? Like,
millwork details.
Like
the list
what
goes
details
on
you have built in. And so... like you're gonna have to finish your own haircut yourself, and you're gonna have to tell basically like at this point like the hairstylist how to cut what to cut without knowing anything about it.
In other words, those sets are incomplete and someone's gonna have to fill in the information. So another way I would describe it too is that, and so by the way, so the folks that I've been in communication with as a result of the Shift House are not specifically or only fire rebuild people. There's a lot of other people in other states probably who are complaining that it's too expensive or that, and other folks are like, this is an incredibly good deal. So like, I'm hearing all over the spectrum, people are saying this is like insanely affordable. What are you guys doing? How is it even possible on your end financially to like, this is way more. But I lost my train of thought. But those sets are incomplete. So someone's gonna have to fill in the blanks. So the way I would describe it is that if we look at the end product, which is a completed house that has obviously siding of some kind, whether it be stucco or wood siding or whatever, it has, an exterior cladding, it has a roof, it has like a fireplace, it has obviously structure, framing, drywall, it has flooring, cabinetry, mirrors, windows, doors, beams, and it has everything in this final house, right, that we can imagine in our minds. Someone has to make a decision about all of those things. And someone has to coordinate and resolve all the conflicts that take place between structure, architecture, let's say design as a separate thing, and MEP and lighting. And those are the biggest ones, right? Someone has to figure, and Title 24 in California. Someone has to solve all those things. Or rather, those will be solved and addressed somehow, right? It's just a matter of who is doing it and how well they're doing it. So when you hire an architect, a proper architect, they're going to coordinate with all those people and experts and their own work to make sure all that stuff is figured out, accounted for the reasons we described of accurate pricing and schedule during construction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and quality. That's what's going to happen. If you go cheap, right, and you don't have an architect do a full CD set or coordinate with all these people, all those things I listed don't just disappear. They have to get resolved somehow. So the question is, how do they get resolved? And if you don't have an architect, a proper architect doing what I've described, they get resolved in a hack manner, right? They get resolved either by the client having to step in and make a bunch of choices, which is extremely stressful, maybe not what you want to do as a client. They get resolved by the contractor who's now stepping in making design decisions, which is not what a contractor should be doing. They get resolved in the field, right? Which is super expensive and takes time, because instead of thinking about it beforehand in the computer and talking with people and taking a few meetings to resolve it, you're doing it in the field, which takes a week or two with 4 people standing around trying to figure it out, the construction crew. It does get resolved quickly and efficiently in this more cost-effective route, but the end result sucks. Like, all of these things have to get resolved somehow.
It's funny because we actually had clients and or potential clients who went ahead and bought plans on those websites, and eventually they're still hiring an architect in the end because there is nowhere for them to start once they have those, really.
I can't remember those examples, and we don't want to name names, but so talk me through it. So what happened? They bought plans, and
they bought plans. They were like, okay, we like that floor plan, but now, like, how do we move forward from there? Because it's not like when you buy those floor plans, it tells you, okay, step 2, now take your plans and get a building permit. Step 3, do this and do that.
So in fact,
like you have those drawings, you still don't know what the process is like or how to move from there, right?
So there are some of these websites who do outline, their like 6-step process, and that includes, after we give you the plans, there's bidding and permitting, as like a step, which I guess the client leads, or maybe some of these websites have contacts with contractors and things like that. But it's it's like, from our side lens as like professionals, it feels like you're buying a Rolex from someone in a jacket with a big jacket that has like a series of Rolex. Hey, buy this Rolex. Look, it's cheap. It's only like $5,000 instead of 25 or whatever it is. Rolexes are not necessarily that expensive. It's $500 instead of $5,000. And it's so even if you have those drawings, though, like to your point, if you go to bid it out, those drawings are not going to have all the information you need to like get a proper bid. So I don't understand. And then some folks, I'm recalling, have then reached out to us or other architects and said, well, there's some things I don't like. Can you like pick up the project from where I'm at? And where I'm at is I have plans. And then we find out that they're, from the quickplans.com or whatever. And it's like, no, you have... Okay, so first of all, the word plans is too vague. So anytime I'm talking to a prospective client and we're talking about plans, or they have plans, or someone did plans for them, I'm like, show me it. Show me what you got. Because plans is generic. Are they conceptual design plans, schematic design plans, design development plans, permit drawings, or CDs? Those 5 things, or whatever, how many things there's, completely different beasts, not even close to being the same thing. And most often, when clients get plans or they get construction documents at a discount, right, because it's so much cheaper than hiring an architect, what they're getting is conceptual plans, which is the lowest form of plans. They're not getting the rest. So it's just I just wish, and obviously we have the show, I wish people knew more about, I wish there was more transparency. And this is not me trying to argue for our services and having everyone hire us or hire architects like us. Look, there's a time and a place for people who they can't do it the other way. They can only afford to spend $20,000 on a set of CED construction documents from plans.com. So I understand it. I'm not belittling that path if it makes sense for people, but I want people to know what they're getting for that price. And it is not the same thing. They're not even the same stratospheres at each other. It's not like, oh, their quality is a little worse. No, they're completely different things. Again, quantitatively, in terms of what you're physically getting. You're getting less stuff, in addition to the design quality being probably subpar. And it's really difficult. It's one of the problems of our profession, is that we have not done a good job, I think, of conveying some of these things. And they are, complicated. It's not necessarily easy to convey all this stuff in a elevator pitch to somebody, and have them like truly believe it, especially when, from the client's perspective, I always describe embarking on creating a new house as like the Wild West for a client who's never done it before, in that when they pick up the phone and they call 10 architects, and they call 10 contractors, they get completely different answers from everybody regarding construction costs, timeline, especially for looping in plans.com kind of ways of doing things. And it's really confusing for clients. I think it's really, really confusing. And they, at the end of the day, they don't know, they have to decide. And they don't know how. I sympathize, because I can feel like they just don't know. They're like, wait, do I believe you? What you're saying is making sense, David, but is it really going to cost me so much more to work with you guys? Or even more if I work with X name architect? Like, why is that the case? And even when we explain it to them, they're like, I get it, but they still, understandably so, are like, yeah, but this is weird. Like, this is not normal. I'm like, I get it. It's not normal. It's a very strange thing that in our architecture profession, we have such a wide range of how a house can be done, or any building can be done.
I mean, I think it's hard too, because our stuff is visual a lot of times. And, like you were explaining the 5 different kinds of plans the word plans could mean. And unless you've seen those as, physical or digital drawings, and you can see visually the difference, if you can read them, you wouldn't know what that means. Like, if you were to explain to me, I would have no idea what that looks like.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I think that's part of the issue, is that a lot of our work is, drawings and things that most people don't ever come across or have never seen before. So they see those 4-line drawing on plans.com looks fantastic. They have no idea that this is the most basic plan they would ever get from an architect.
Yeah.
Right. And it's funny enough, because I feel like clients who are pretty novice into, embarking on those types of projects, they don't know what's most important. And a lot of them, get worried about permits. A lot of them get worried about the floor plans. Like, oh, if I have the floor plans, then that's it, right?
Yep, agreed.
And they're thinking that, okay, if I can buy the floor plans for $200 on plans.com, I'm going to save myself a bunch of time, a bunch of money, and then I could maybe just hire an architect from there. So then I've saved the few first hours in meetings to get to that point.
Oh, they think it's more than that. They think that they're saving 60% of what an architect does.
I took a shortcut to still get to the same outcome, but I found that shortcut. The truth is that, despite floor plans being tricky to be done well, it takes some skills to do them well. It's not the hardest part of the exercise, and it's not the most costly part of the exercise of designing a home.
Yeah.
So actually, and a lot of time, if you were to buy floor plans on plans.com and bring it to the architect would probably ignore them, because let's be honest, the plans that are on those websites are trash. They're not.
They're generic.
They're very generic.
Not
they're
bad.
Very
They're
basic.
just generic.
Yeah, they're basic, but also I don't know. I've seen plans of ADUs, and you have bedrooms that are the size you can't even put a queen bed in. At some point, but it looks great. It looks like on their drawings they show a bed and this and that, but
we've seen drawings done by maybe some of those websites or other architects, and I put in air quotes because actually they use those clients. Unfortunately, I think they didn't know it either, but they hired a draftsperson who claimed to be an architect. And this is another thing too that happens all the time. People in design build offices saying, I have an architect, I'm an architect. Show me the license. Oh, well, you're not an architect, you're a draftsperson.
I mean, you could be licensed as an architect, but still not do design, not do design,
True. But so anyway, my point is that we've seen plans where like beds were smaller than they're supposed to be. Like this bed is not to scale. The room looks like there's room around the bed, but that's not a real bed. That bed doesn't exist. That's a Toys R Us bed. The Kids R Us bed. What's going on here? And so to your point about the plans, though, I like that point. It is funny, like the floor plans and permits. That's what everyone focuses on. And they think, okay, I have my plans, I have my permit, I can start construction. That's what everyone asks, right? Even people who are real estate agents, which are supposedly knowledgeable about all this, they are not. They are always asking, okay, so when do we have permit drawings, or when do we have permit, and when do we have our floor plan? Meaning, when can we start construction? I'm like, those are not the same thing as starting construction, because construction documents, again, are like typically, let's say roughly 25 to 30% of the architect's work. I mean, imagine that. The architect's work, 30%, a third of it almost, is just for construction documents. And like almost all that work is beyond a permit drawing set, right? So I would describe, this is a weird visual, but like permit drawings rather, like the work it takes for us to do permit drawings and the basic floor plan is like, if you imagine, I don't know why I'm thinking this, those cakes that have like a million layers in it? Like there's like crepes that are stacked up and there's like 100 layers.
I don't like those cakes.
They're kind of weird.
The crepe cakes? Ugh.
Yeah, the crepe cakes. Yeah. There's one in New York that's really well known. But anyway, you've seen those cakes before. There's like a gajillion layers. The plan and the permit is like one layer of this entire cake. So the idea that we're focusing on those two tiny layers of 100 or even more than that is like absolutely ridiculous.
And even just, a little touch on the permit note here. Unless you're building a complicated house on a complicated site, it's not hard to get permits.
It's not that bad.
It's not hard. It's not hard. Like if you do your homework and you hire the right people, like you're gonna get your permits.
Again, especially relative to the entire process and everything else that we're seeing. So I've said before in these recordings, and it's absolutely true, that the other benefit of having a true like architect is that they're able to look at all of the information about the design, the site, the permitting, the HOA, the construction, mechanical, and the budget, and the scale, all of the information, and all the consultants, the arborists, whoever else, and then provide order to that information and say, okay, we do not need to engage that person now. I understand they're eager to start. I understand they have questions. They're not important right now. They will become very important, and they are critical to the project, but not right now, right? I understand we want to talk about, you, as a client, you're very specific about door levers or door, I don't know, whatever detail. Great, but we're in this phase, so we can keep that in the back of our minds, but it's not necessary right now. So we provide a structuring over the entire thing, which is one of the biggest things that a person who doesn't know and hasn't gone through it, they don't know these things. So oftentimes when I'm talking to the general public or new clients, the thing that I'm realizing is they come at me with a bunch of information, which is great. I love information, but I have to order it for them and tell them, interesting, not for now. That's for later. I understand that person keeps calling you and saying, when can they start foundations or whatever? That's like 6 months from now. So like kindly tell them, hold off for a little bit, or talk to my architects, which is actually what they should be doing, is they should be talking to an architect. And so I think that's also one of the most underrated aspects and values of hiring an architect, and early also, I would say, is using them or us as a resource to understand and make sense of all of this data that you're being hit with as a client. You don't know. You're like, is this right? Is that wrong? And you should be using the architect for that. Now, at some point, you have to trust the architect. If you don't trust the architect, then what I'm saying doesn't make sense. Like the trust has to start and begin somewhere. And ideally, you find a good architect to do that, to be that person for you. But I just, again, as a person on the inside of it, doing it, I can't imagine if I were a client who didn't know any of this stuff, trying to do it on my own without having that that agent, that confidant, that friend almost, right, to help you out. Now, there are also owners' representatives who do that role specifically. However, owners' reps first of all, there's a lot of bad ones. There's a handful of good ones too. So it's kind of dangerous territory in that regard. But owners reps also are pretty much reserved for like ultra expensive, ultra wealthy people. Because if you're on a tight budget, you generally don't have like extra cash to be spending
no for these people
3%, 4% of your construction costs on an owner's rep, when you could just use the architect to do that.
So if I am, one of those people who, let's say, can't afford hiring an architect and do a full custom home, and I should run away from plans.com and going that route.
What do you do?
What do you do? I mean, I'm trying to be in those people's shoes and think about, okay, well, maybe you only do what you can afford. And if you can't afford it, you don't do it, right? I mean, I'm thinking about like, I don't know, growing up, we had work done in the house, never hired an architect. My dad, did it all, right? So it's either you do it yourself kind of deal, which also comes with like,
that's a different,
issues and why not? Or I think the better option than plans.com would be to look at a prefab company, because the advantage of the prefab, you're not just buying drawings, like you're actually buying a home, like a home kit, right? Like those homes have been tested, they're coming and they're being built for you. So it's kind of like a half measure, and I can't say it's gonna look beautiful or amazing, or I would call that architecture, but I think it probably gives you a bit more in the bundle that you're getting for that price than just buying floor plans. And if you can afford the other route of hiring an architect and going the standard route of the project.
Yeah, I mean, so if you could do prefab, first of all, there's not a lot of great prefab companies out there currently. There's actually a few of them from China, but with the current situation we're in as a country, there's a lot of skepticism as to how that's going to work
in terms of tariffs and
everything else. Like if I purchase this thing, what's going to happen if like tomorrow the administration decides to change their policy? Now I'm stuck. I'm out, $50,000 or 100, or not 50 grand, like 200 grand or whatever it is. And then is my home that's on a shipping container on a boat delayed by a year? And we've spoken to some people, and a lot of people are just nervous about that. I think prefab. I'm going to save what I'm going to say for like another recording. But I think prefab is a good solution if you're on the ultra tight budget end and you need to be super fast. So I'm thinking specifically some folks who lost their houses in the fires, and they were not covered at all, or maybe like hardly at all, and they don't have a place to live. They need a place to be. And they need it like now. They can't afford to wait 18 months for a house to be built, or 2 years or whatever. Well, it's there again. There's downsides, but hey, it might make a lot of sense in those situations, in those kind of extreme.
Yeah,
I would consider like an extreme situation. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to move on to a different thing. Do you want to talk about prefab?
No, I mean, what's interesting with prefab is that like if you are on a tight budget and tight schedule, what's good is that some of them give you flexibility in like adjusting the plans to what you want and what you need. Like you can change the room size, you can maybe like customize the configuration because it's a modular, system that they work with. So I think that gives you a bit more flexibility than just buying generic plans that you can change.
Well, you could change the plans too, but on your own. Or the company can do it for you. But I think your point though about the buying the plans and having a contractor do it is that it's a half step between like custom and prefab in a certain way.
Yeah, and you're trying to run a show with like, 15 people missing. Who's going to step out for those roles? It's either going to be you or the contractor.
Yeah.
And there is no guarantee on how that's going to turn out. There's no guarantee of anything. You're kind of like,
yeah, that's
you get the plans, but that's the only sure thing you have in hand.
That's interesting because it's making me realize that buying a set of plans, and that's really only that you're getting, and then some loose contacts to like a recommended contract or recommended whatever, which I'm also skeptical of. That's like a half measure, and that's where like the problems are. If you do full prefab, and then you can potentially even see the product beforehand, depending on where they're located.
Yeah.
Some of them suck, but like you're saying, like it's a very known It is more like you're buying, a watch or a phone or something off the shelf. Like it's a known thing.
And then, like the timeline is much shorter because it's all assembled in giant
Super
warehouses,
fast.
right? So you're talking about just a few weeks.
Oh, and
to
the
get
cost
it
is
built.
gonna be like the equivalent of like hiring an architect. Just
It's gonna be a fraction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, an architect's
And-
fee is gonna be the cost of like the entire house.
And even in terms of permit, if I'm not mistaken, prefab gets approved at state level.
Sometimes it depends. You might be thinking more about it. It depends. There's different types of quote. So prefab is a generic term, and there's different types of prefab. And I'm forgetting the exact terminology, but what you're describing only applies to certain things. So like modular systems for like multifamily structure type stuff is more of that category. Is it factory? There's another word for it too, but
Isn't it approved by like the state housing department or something like that?
yeah. But not all prefab solutions are that. I want to be very clear. Like a lot of prefab solutions don't have that level of approval. And I don't know the nuances of the legalities, but they are like different things. And those types of products actually have to have like the equivalent of a VIN number, like a car VIN number and like a stamp or something. Like it's that kind of deal. There's also prefab where it's more about the construction of it is considered prefab and less to do with state level of approvals and stuff. But see, this is also where like even words like prefab, like I said a second ago, it's a generic word. And even in the subject of talking about prefab construction, well, what do we really mean here? Do we mean that we're using a structural system that's more efficient and has, the finishes applied to it already? Or is it just the structure, the framing that's partly prefabricated? Is that considered prefab?
I mean, true prefab is, the thing comes already assembled.
No, I
That's
know that.
Prefabricated.
I understand that. But prefab is used loosely, and it ends up describing all these different things from, I would say, true prefab, like you've described, to, well, the structural system is more like comes in bigger pieces, so it's faster to erect. And that's also sometimes thought about as being prefab.
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, but everything else we're doing is still typical, like all the millwork, all the other stuff, which is like the majority of the house, is done in a traditional construction method. So that's not really prefab.
Yeah.
But so I think prefab is on like that is if you're on the ultra tight end of budget and schedule.
And now a quick break to thank the sponsors who support the second studio. Say goodbye to design-unfriendly spreadsheets. Programma, built by designers for designers, provides an integrated suite of tools for every phase of your project, from mood boards to advanced specification tools to project management. Seamlessly integrated, easily shareable, and always current, Programma reduces redundancy and minimizes costly errors. Share your work in a format that works for you, be it PDF, spec sheets, or online, branded client dashboards with always up-to-date specification details. Join Interior Design Movers and Shakers and start for free by clicking the Programma link in our show notes. Experience the difference with Programma, software built for interior design workflows.
The tendency for people, and a lot of folks are, in the Palisades and Altadena, are in this position because of the insurance coverage they had, where you have a tight budget, and I've come across a lot of folks who are like right at that cusp financially and schedule-wise of like they could almost hire an architect and go the traditional route of building a house, but they're just short, which is the funds are just like almost not enough, or they're enough but just like right on that cusp. And I've seen this a number of times. And so let's talk about people who are in that position. Like, what do they do? Because if you're at that threshold and you're on that fence, do you go to one side or the other? Do you do the traditional route and hire an architect, hire an engineer, hire all these people? Or do you go the plans.com route or the shift house route, which was maybe, let's kick that out just to make things clear, plans.com route or hire traditional route? Like what do you do? And I'd say, if you're a person, again, who cares about design and you want to be particular about stuff, you got to go the traditional route. Otherwise, you're going to be unhappy. Because the other thing, too, is I think people tend to focus on the immediate, like what's going to cost now, like the contracts I'm signing, how much I'm paying for this and that now, how long it's going to take. But do you also want to spend a year or 2 years, however long it takes, because construction is still going to take that amount of time, and spend all that money and end up with something you're not happy with? And that's a big question, right? Or do you potentially spend a little bit more money? Hopefully it's not too much more, and you have much more assurance that you're going to end up in a house that you actually do love.
I mean, I think it goes back to, people's personal situation and how much risk they can afford to take or not. Like if you can't financially take any risk and the money that you have now is all you can have, it is a risk to go and hire an architect, to go the traditional route. I
would actually argue the opposite. So one way that decision gets made, again, is I think if you as a person, as a homeowner, knows that you like things in a particular way, you like design, right? You want to be involved in that in some manner, or you want to have a nice house in the end that you're going to live in for the next 30 years. Then that tilts the decision toward the traditional route and hiring an architect. The other thing too is there's a tendency for folks who are on a really tight budget to want to shortcut all the soft cost professionals. So who and what are the soft costs? In all of this, there's soft costs and hard costs. And for the sake of this conversation, hard costs are construction costs, which is basically all the money you spend on the contractor, because you're going to pay them to build the house. That's hard cost. Soft cost is everything else. It's the architect, it's the engineers, lighting designer, landscape architect, permitting fees, Title 24 guy. I'm trying to think if I missed anything else.
Permitting.
All that stuff is the soft cost. And the tendency is, when people are on a tight budget, is to want to hack away at the fees of the architect, the engineer, the landscape architect, all those people. Cut it down, right? You say you're going to charge me, $300,000. Do it for $150. Give me $150 worth of work. Let's cut it. Maybe it sounds counterintuitive, but that's the exact opposite of what you want to do. It is true that if you're operating at a certain general price point, there are certain architects you can't afford. And so you're going to have to be in a certain bracket with the architecture offices you're working with. But you don't want to go too low and cross a threshold in terms of architect's fee and therefore architect quality. You don't want to go too low, because then you open yourself to all kinds of problems throughout the process of design, permitting, and construction. So the way that we keep projects on schedule and within budget is by making sure that our professionals we've hired up front are providing the services they need to provide to make sure we can hit those marks. And you can't do that if you're hiring an architect who's a third of the typical price. It's not possible, because again, it's quantifiable differences. You are getting less services. They're not going to help you ensure they're hitting these marks. And you cannot ensure you're hitting those marks of budget and schedule without doing all the stuff I mentioned, including CDs. It's not possible. It's physically not possible. So we also bid a while back on a project, which I can't go into the details of because there's the NDA involved. And it was relative to the scale of the project, ultra fast schedule, like blistering fast schedule, and extreme, and actually a decent budget, but the budget was not, there wasn't a whole lot of extra money there. And the client decided to cut down all of those soft cost fees and go with someone ultra cheap. And it's like, I was speaking with the owner's rep who we were involved with, and they're like, that is a 100% a recipe for disaster. So good luck to them, because a year from now or 10 months from now, they're going to have some serious problems.
Well, because again, people just don't hack at the money that they make, right? Like, why would I do 100% of the work for 50% of the fee? Unless, I don't know, I just love losing money. Like, that means there is work that will not be provided for that price.
Yep.
They are hacking away stuff. And you need to understand what that is. If you're looking at saving on a project, you're better off, I don't know, limiting your scope of work, maybe not building those 2 extra rooms that you're probably going to use twice a year, and save construction costs, save on the hard costs rather than the soft costs. And, maybe down the line, if you have more money, just do an addition or whatever, but or have a floor plan that's more efficient, work with your architect, and instead of building a Mac mansion, maybe downsize. You can still retain the same program, just be more efficient on how things are laid out.
Yeah. You got to spend money on the planning and the thinking. It's like you could. It reminds me of the work smarter or not harder kind of thought. Like if you're creating this I don't know what, a car maybe. If you're creating a car and you need to make sure that it was made under a certain, within a certain budget and on by a certain schedule. And then you have the architect, the designer, architect of the car who coordinates with the engineer, the electrical people, the battery. They coordinate with everybody. And you're like, guess what? I'm going to go with the cheapest person for that. And I still want it to be on budget because I want to save money for like building the thing. I mean, anybody who's in like, product design would be like, that's mental. What? Yeah. You think that it's going to go according to plan, which is what you need. So when you have a tight budget and a tight schedule, it needs to go like according to plan to the nth degree. Everything needs to be locked in. How are you going to do that if you don't have the conductor or the composer? It's not possible. And that's, again, time and time we hear from people who have tried that route and then they get stuck and they call us or our colleagues and they're like, it's been 5 months. I don't like anything that's happened. I've wasted a bunch of money. I'm in a hole. Pull me out. And so in the end, they're at the end up spending more time and money because of it. It's just, I don't know. It happens too many times.
I think, going back to like, what do you do depending on what situation you're in? I think it's good for people, hopefully, to listen to this episode and understand like what are the options out there. But I have to say, though, I mean, ultimately, the decision is on the client, If the client has very limited funds and they decide to embark on a more traditional route, you can't blame people in the team if you're running out of money for your own project.
Interesting. Well, expand on that.
Well, like the client is responsible on how much money they have.
Sure.
And if they run out of the money, you can point the finger, to the rest of the team and be like, that's your fault if I'm out of money. Like, you have to know how much you have. You have to be very clear from the beginning, if that is the case, to make sure that the team understands what they can work with. I think that's another thing in from the client's point of view, when they make that selection of which route to go, is to be very upfront about that, if that is one of the bigger component that you have to deal with on the project.
Yeah, I know, I agree.
As much as we can plan and design accordingly, like if that is a big one, we got to know, like, I don't want to be responsible for a client, going bankrupt or whatever because they're not forward when the project starts.
So those conversations should be happening, and they do happen with us from the very beginning. So when I have initial phone calls with clients, I'm always asking what their budget is. And someone's like, I don't have a budget. I'm like, you have a budget. Just give me something.
You need to have a budget.
Because I have seen clients in the past who are like, I'm not concerned about money. I'm like, all right, dude, you have a nice car, a really nice car. It's like, I'm not concerned about the budget. You design what I want, and then we'll make it happen. And then lo and behold, Mr. Baller doesn't have any money. And I'm like, dude, you said, I repeatedly asked you, like, I need to know your budget because I can design something that costs you $3,000 a square foot. I can design you something that's a lot less than that. And they're like, no, not concerned about money. And then we go throughout this process. I keep saying, like, look, I'm kind of flying blind here. Design the thing, get the first ROM. Blah, 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 blah. It's too expensive. Dude. And then they're mad, right? And it's like, don't be mad. Like, this also gets back to the client. You got to listen to your architect. We don't ask for your budget because for funsies. I need to have some parameters so I don't. And it's also out of self-preservation. I'm not interested in working on projects that don't go anywhere.
I know. Well, and also to be efficient with the money, spent in our fee. Like, we don't want to design things that, we know people can't afford.
No, it's a waste of time. Even if we get paid for that time, it's a waste of time.
Well, it's a waste of time, and it's also deceiving for the clients because they see all those nice stuff, and then, they can't afford building it. So I think that's something that, in general, clients need to be more aware of and more willing to think about and share, even though they don't have maybe you start the projects the first time you're doing one, you have no idea how much things cost. Like, I'm a whatever, like, normal person down the street, I need to rebuild a house. I have no idea how much it costs, but what I do know is how much could I be spending, like, what is my maximum limit. Or like, what is a range I would feel comfortable and uncomfortable going past.
And another way that I phrase it sometimes in the case of the fire rebuilds, a lot of people have like a max because of insurance. That's a very clear, and that's one of the things that's been kind of nice is that it's very transparent. People are upfront, like, this is my budget, cannot exceed.
They have to.
Can I do it? And unfortunately, a lot of my phone calls are like, maybe, but it's so tight that I'm not sure. But I was going to say, but for other folks in more normal conditions, their budget is flexible. So one of the questions I'd like to ask is, okay, if I could give you your absolute dream house, and we're talking about a custom house in this case that they're going to live in for a long time, it is like the best perfect house for you. What's the max number on that? Knowing that there's always some amount of compromise for most people. And at some point they're like, this Windows system versus that Windows system, I really like that one, but that's going to push me to a point where that I don't want to do that. And so it's just tricky because we have to set up. That's also why when I have initial conversations with people and we're talking about budgets and they do have some kind of flexibility, we're not stuck to that in the first conversation. We start the work, we get some ROMs, and there's a back and forth, right? It's a dialogue and conversation between budget, scope, and schedule, and the quality, right? All those things are constantly kind of dancing with each other and pushing and pulling with each other early on in the process, and then it starts to take more crystallized form as we go forward. And that's like the best way to do it, rather than any other method.
I think also what's interesting is kind of like riffing on the fire rebuild and things we've observed happening is that there is a lot of professional coming from out of state to step in those rebuild zone. And I think, I don't know, I mean, as a homeowner, I feel like I don't think even if they're they come from out of state, they probably bring their cost from out of state too, like their pricing from out of state, which is probably like much lower than like people here. But I don't know, I don't think I feel very confident having someone who's never worked in California.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't necessarily need to have done work in those zones to be knowledgeable, but at least be familiar with how things work in that state and like how pricing works in that state, like how regulation works and all of that stuff.
There are actually a number of contractors we've spoken with who are reputable ones in Los Angeles. They know their stuff. They're experts. And they're like, I'm not participating in anything in the Palisades. Unless someone reaches out to me and they seem to really, really have their shit together and they're confident that they're going to do it and they have an appropriate budget. Apart from that, I'm not seeking any work over there. I'm not bothering because it's kind of a mess. And because there's just, at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about kind of the just general confusion that our industry creates for homeowners under normal conditions. And in the case of the Palisades or Altadena, it's multiple times worse because there's just so many people diving into there. And actually one of the contractors we were speaking with, he's like, I'm pretty sure that these contractors from Texas or contractors from whatever other states are coming in, they're going to come in, get a retainer, fuck things up, and then bounce. Yeah. And then it's going to be a whole mess, and then someone's going to have to solve it. Another contractor I was speaking with a while ago was like, they're thinking I'm probably going to get some work now because they're a big name. But in his mind, I'm going to be getting work from this the next 10 years because a bunch of crap is going to be built. Then those clients are going to call someone to come in and fix it. Yeah. And I was just speaking to a different contractor who is doing that same thing on a spec house, not fire related anything. Client bought a multi-million-dollar spec house and it was built like shit, like most spec houses. And now they had to hire a different contractor to come in and do millions of dollars of work to fix the thing. So, we talk about plans being too vague, prefab being too vague, good contractor, too vague. That doesn't mean anything to me. And I tell clients, you tell me they're a great contractor, has no effect on me. I'm not swayed by that at all. I don't get excited or saddened. I'm indifferent. I need to talk to them and see their work. And then I'll let you know what I think.
Yeah, I mean,
and most of the time, my feedback is not great.
It doesn't make them good at what they do,
No, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, that's the case. Okay, so we're back after an intermission, and I don't recall where we left off. But one of the things I wanted to mention is that one of the mistakes that I think clients make when they're first embarking on a project is everyone focuses on the construction cost. Like we were talking about, people focus on permitting, on plans, on whatever, and focusing on the construction cost is a common mistake. Obviously, the construction cost is important, but that's not the same thing as the total project cost. And this is also where I find clients run into problems when they start a project, because everyone talks about the construction cost and clients think that's the total project cost when that's not true. So
yeah, so let's say a client comes and they're like, well, I have, I don't know, like $1 million to build. Well, no, actually, you don't have $1 million. If that is your total budget, right?
You have less than that.
You have less than that.
Yeah. So how much less is there to be spent, out of the total project cost for construction? So this varies tremendously depending on the quality of house you're doing, the size of the house, where you are, the people you're working with, and all these types of things. I'll say roughly, though, it's like 20 to 25% of the project cost goes toward those soft costs that I was mentioning earlier. So let's say, just for the sake of conversation, only 80% of your budget goes towards construction, or maybe even 75% of your budget goes toward construction. And that's a sizable difference. And that's also, I think it is an important thing to understand for clients, but also for us as professionals in our profession, to realize that most people out there don't know that there's this extra 20 to 25% that has to be spent to make the project work, right? The best way, I think it was Peak Projects who described the houses and projects as being like a business. You're starting a business and you need the right people to execute the business and plan the business, and whatever other kind of analogies you want to use. And I feel like the construction costs are, the easy thing that everyone thinks about, but they forget about all the personnel it's required on the soft cost planning side to make it work. And so when I'm talking to people over the phone, my first question to them, aside from construction costs, is, well, what is your total project cost? And again, 9 out of 10 times, people are like, wait, what do you mean? I said, what is like the total amount you're trying to spend? Oh, it's $1 million. Okay, so that's not your construction cost. And then I work through them and say, okay, this is typically how it breaks down. This is how much money goes toward the us as an architect / designer, goes toward engineering, et cetera, et cetera. Again, these things vary, but within our region and what we do, I have a decent sense of generally what things are going to be, and I can ballpark it either on the phone or like afterwards. Sometimes I want to crunch numbers and think through it a bit more. And then on top of that too, you always have a contingency for construction. So, and that varies. Like remodels, the contingencies, maybe 15 to 20%, 10%. It changes a lot. New construction tends to be lower because we have less unknowns, but that also chips away at the projected construction costs, or the goal that we've set for construction costs as we're working. So if I have a project and I'm working on it, I have in my mind as an architect a construction cost we're trying to hit. That is, after that, so that's the construction cost without all the soft costs, and also without the contingency, because I don't want to rely on the contingency during design. So very quickly, your $1 million goes down to whatever the math is, $700,000, so something to that degree. And I think it's something that just very much overlooked, and it's a misconception along the lines of like plans or good contractors and these types of terms.
And I think that's what the question of like, what's your budget, like what's the ideal budget and what is the worst case scenario budget, because that contingency could add up quite a bit, depending on like where you're looking to build.
Yeah.
And knowing like where is that limit to not go over is super important, because you can't design and build without a contingency. Like there is just,
and that contingency will be used, to whatever degree in construction.
Yeah, like you're doing a remodel and you open up the walls and you realize, like all the studs are eaten by termites. We got to replace it, or we got to reframe, like things like that, or tariffs, or things that happen during a project. There is things that nobody can control that could impact the project. So you need that safety blanket in case something happens, and that has to be part of the budget.
It's really just it's just so complicated and so complex to create a house from scratch that's not a prefab house. You know, like when we buy cars, like we've been shopping for cars, it's like pretty easy because there's a set number of cars out there that fit what we need, and we see the models online. We can go test drive them. It's all like very known. The only thing that's unknown is the negotiating with the dealership, which I find to be quite annoying. But like it's a relatively straightforward process. But embarking on creating a house, you are, as a client, hiring directly or indirectly, 6 or 7 different offices of different types of professionals that all have to work together, like starting a business. So it's a lot. I think also, it should be stated that we're at a weird time where even the middle class people, in terms of their income, or upper middle class, a lot of them can't afford to build a house.
Well, in California, I know.
Not in California. And things are really, really out of whack in that regard. And it's difficult. Like, what is the solution to allow people who are making, I would consider, good money, to live on or from? How do we allow them to have access to higher quality architecture? And architects. I think that's also where the Shift House comes into play. I mean, that was it, as I said before in the other recording, that's the point of it, right? Is to reduce the cost, make the whole thing much more accessible for a certain bracket of people. But it's weird because the pricing, the architect's fee for that, our fee in that architecture and design fee in the Shift House is like crazy low compared to the normal fee for a custom house in that region. It's like a literal fraction of the fee. So then therefore the contractors and the developers who know the industry and know what it means to build in these areas are like, it's what's the price? That's very intriguing, is what they say. And it's a good deal. But it's still, sometimes multiple times higher than what other people have paid for their plans.
Of course.
So I've gotten messages from people saying, like, this is a ripoff. Like, you're ripping people off because it's just too expensive, because I got a full set of plans for a house for like $25,000 or something. And I don't even bother engaging because, it's not my thing.
Well, also you have to educate people from scratch, because obviously they don't know what they got for $25,000.
No,
like, they don't understand what they got.
I'll do it on here. It gets broadcast. I'll do it if I'm talking to a prospective client who's a nice person and they need help. But I'm not going to do it with some random person DMing me on Instagram. I don't have time for that. But it does go to show all of us that there is this super wide spread. And even when we have a pricing point for, let's say, high quality architecture, I know we're biased, but let's just say that, and it's dead center, or even on the lower side, you still have a whole population of people who are not understanding, the deal that's put in front of them. And it's a very, very strange thing. And I just wish that there was a solution to it. And I know, not just for ourselves, but I have a lot of colleagues and friends that are architects. And it's not like that all of us together only want to work for the 1%, and that's like our dream.
No.
And so more and more these days, there's there's a moral component to all of this, that it comes to the surface. Maybe it is being accelerated or pushed to the surface partly because of the fire rebuilds, and people don't have the money because they weren't covered and whatever else. But these problems have always existed, have existed for many, many years now, this massive gap, right, between high quality things and what people can actually afford in general as a upper mid class. And so anyway, I mean, I don't have a bigger point.
And it's tricky because, again, if you're a small architecture office, you need projects that have a certain revenue, in order to to sustain your practice.
I know.
You can take on projects that are too low because the amount of work is still going to be the same, and you can't just live on that. At the same time, you're a much bigger firm, your overheads and expenses are a lot higher too. So you can also take on this project. So it becomes really complicated, and maybe a small to mid-sized office could take on one of these projects just to help out clients, but it's not something that you can do on a repeat
basis.
Yeah.
So there is also the reality of like some people I will turn away, not because I don't like them, not because we couldn't figure out a fee that works just barely enough well for us to do it. It's more that I don't think this is feasible. And if I sign on for this, and even if I do my job 10 out of 10, I'm perfect. No one's perfect, but let's say we'd perform it perfectly. I still don't know if I can ensure success because you don't have enough funds for construction. So now you're talking about a pool of contractors that is like, dark alley, shady corner selling fake Rolexes like I was talking about before. And I don't want to engage in that because it's going to be a disaster.
Because it's going to be a
likely.
problem at some point.
It's going to be a huge problem.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's obviously a problem for the client. And it's almost my responsibility to back off, to step away at the beginning and say, like, I actually don't think it's possible. And so if I do the project with you, I'm still saying I'm not sure. I'm still indirectly giving you hope that is possible. And I'd rather just step away. And also it does impact us. Like I don't want to be working with people, becoming close to them as we do with clients and putting our time and creative effort, into something that I know is not going to likely be able to happen. It's just not good at all. I think the other thing we could talk about is people rightfully would be wondering, well, the house, the shift house and other pre-designed houses by proper architects, how is that different from me buying plans from like plans.com or wherever, when I also, as a client, I see those plans, I'm like, those look pretty good to me, right? And they're, again, significantly cheaper than what's happening with the Case Study 2.0 program. Why would I go with a Case Study 2.0 house or the Shift house like we're doing, as opposed to a plans.com? Because they're both pre-designed, right? But one is, I don't know what I'm making something. One is 3x, the price than the other.
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, in terms of design, like one is going to be super basic and generic. The other one is going to be way more interesting in terms of design and approach, right? So that would be, the first thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. It's
and then I think in terms of the Shift house itself, it's not just plans. Like things have been figured out. Like what the rooms are going to look like, what the materials options, are there. Like again, you're not just taking you're not just dipping your toes in the water, by getting the plans. Like there is the whole water has been figured out, So, I mean, you can compare them, I think.
Yeah, I think this goes back to what you were saying earlier about, what we do and things we're describing are very visual, and it's like hard to understand them. But I'll say this real quick. So I have spoken to a couple developers who are interested in working with us. I don't know if it's going to work out. Who knows with these things. But they know the game, meaning to say they understand the stuff that we've been describing. And they're the ones also who are developers are very budget conscious and understandably so. A lot of architects don't like working with developers because they're just constantly being like, can you be cheaper? Can you be cheaper? It's like, dude, no, I can't, and stop asking for lower construction costs. It's not possible. But even so, with that said, developers are very interested in what we've done and they see great value in it. So it's kind of like, to me, actually, in a certain way, that's sort of proof that what's being offered is of significant value, because it's being essentially vetted by people whose their livelihood is to build things in an efficient manner to make money. And they understand that they need quality services to get that done.
I mean, I think the other big difference between, let's say, the Shift house and plans.com is that you're actually talking to real people and you're talking to the people who are doing the work.
Who are doing the work, who know all the other professionals. I mean, we've onboarded the other professionals. We do work in that area. It's like, it's weird because it's really like you're buying, you're buying a product, but really you're buying services from like the actual people who are experts in that area. It's not a vending machine type of transaction.
Yeah, it's not a salesperson on the chat online who's selling you the plans, right? I mean, even if you have like the smallest or the biggest question about your project, like, you can ask your architect about it. You can try to ask plans.com. I don't know that they have the answer for you, right?
Yeah, and so that also extends to like some of the strangeness with that house and the people that it's for and the problems it's trying to solve, that tier, again, that kind of mid tier, let's call it, in terms of pricing and accessibility. It's like someone was asking me, well, like, what's the fee structure like on this, and like, how do people pay for this? And as of now, my response is like, it's pretty close to being a traditional arrangement for a custom house. There are some differences too, because there's some of the numbers are fixed, so we're dispersing the payments differently, whatever else. But I'm like, you still have to, as a client, you still have to pay all the different professionals I mentioned and a contractor. So it's not like, I think some people see it and they think that it's going to be more transactional, like they're buying a car. So, okay, I'm just going to cut you a big check and then it'll be done, which actually is easy. Like, yeah, we could do that for sure. If someone was like, I don't want to mess with payments and contractors, I want to cut one check and then you guys sort it out and do it, that's fine. But the way that the house is going to be done, the service is being offered, it really is more like a traditional route in a positive way, because that means that it ensures a level of attentiveness and care and quality in the end, as opposed to us like just literally selling plans and be like, good luck, whatever strange person, username 124, Sam, you bought the plans, good luck to you. I have no idea what's going to happen after that. It's not that at all.
Yeah. And, people could argue like, well, sure, but like that, the price of that relationship is like much higher than if I didn't want that relationship. But I think what you have to understand is that you do need some of that relationship through the process, through the design and construction process of a house, right?
You mean the client relationship?
The client architect relationship, right? There is a lot of architects who are very cheap because, again, they don't provide construction administration. They disappear when construction starts.
Oh, so you're not talking about the relationship between the architect and the client. You're talking about the relationship between the architect and all the professionals to get the project done.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, if you don't go the plans.com route, yeah, like,
right.
like
the project
that
management.
is part of the price. That is part of that's a portion of the price that you pay when you hire the professional, is that relationship throughout the whole process.
Yeah, so another way to describe it is the project management and the coordination effort, right? Which is actually a big part of what we do, which is not a tangible thing, right? That's not necessarily associated with time spent, drawing a line in the computer or whatever we're talking about. That's more like phone calls and troubleshooting and stuff like that. And that's actually what makes or breaks projects just as much as the documents themselves.
Yeah.
And that's a hefty part of it that is very different from like the vending machine approach.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, I think it's been interesting to speak with so many different types of people that are coming from completely different reference points. And I think as a profession, we have to think about this more. And if we can somehow solve it, I think that would do ourselves, but also a lot of clients, a lot of favors, and help them to not get so lost amongst this like completely different sets of information that they're getting from professionals in quotes out there.
Yeah, I mean, we can do as much as we can do. I think the problem is that as long as plans.com and all of those models are going to exist, there is always going to be people who are interested in just that, like, raw initial number, and that's all they're going to see. So,
and as I said earlier, this whole conversation. Obviously, we have our way of doing things, but we're not trying to also say that sites like that or that way of producing a house should not exist, because there are some folks maybe that is the right fit. But there just needs to be a bit more honesty from those companies as to exactly what people are getting and what they're not getting.
Yeah.
And they hide behind these words like plans, for example. You have building plans or permit plans or whatever they're going to say. And it's just like, it's not the same thing at all. So anyway, I think that's all I have to say. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Give us an outro.
Thanks everyone for listening to the show. If you like what we do, please leave us a review. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram. Also, we're there pretty often. If you have any questions, any guest suggestions, or anything you want to share, you can hit us at the hotline 213-222-6950. And of course, there's always the website secondstudiopod.com that has all of the episodes and more. Stay tuned for more stuff coming your way. We're not quite done with 2025 yet, so keep listening.
We're like halfway through.
I feel like it's the end of the year already.
It feels like it's been 4 years so far. All right, everybody. Thanks and talk soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.